The convoy sailed on the steady waves of the South China Sea. The many-day voyage was coming to an end, but there were still about 300 miles to the coast of China, and the soldiers on board lazily looked around at the boring, endless horizon. From time to time, patrol fighters from an escort aircraft carrier flew over the ships. Covered by a few escorts, American transport ships headed for British Hong Kong, delivering men and equipment for Wedemeyer's group. 30,000 soldiers and numerous heavy armored vehicles were a formidable force by the standards of a war-weary China. History turned in such a way that just 4 years after the end of World War II, American soldiers reappeared in China. They were ready to turn the tide of the war. In the middle of the night, devastating artillery fire wiped out the Communists' first line of defense. Several American tank battalions attacked at full speed, blinding the defenders with their headlights. The artillery destroyed the Chinese anti-tank batteries and panicked the infantry. The Communists suffered heavy losses and did not have time to regroup before American tanks broke into the new line of defense. Although the PLA fighters fought desperately, the defense quickly fell apart into separate pockets of resistance. The advanced units of the Wedemeyer group broke through 2 lines of defense in just 3 hours, but it took the same amount to overcome the last line. The rear supply teams, the surviving detachments and the corps headquarters fought to the death, but were defeated. By dawn, the PLA launched a furious counterattack, throwing their tank reserve and their remaining infantry into the fray, but the forces were too unequal. American Shermans fired at the outdated light tanks and self-propelled guns of the Communists from extreme distance, and American howitzer shells exploded densely among the infantry. Nevertheless, the command of the Chinese Corps continued to send the remnants of their reserves into battle, believing that they had Kuomintang troops in front of them, who would not be able to maintain pressure for a long time. This false confidence cost them dearly. In a few hours, the Americans destroyed more than 150 tanks, defeating the enemy's tank forces in the Shanghai direction. The infantry also suffered crushing losses. Without artillery cover, having lost the support of tanks, hundreds of communist fighters died from bullets and shells, having virtually no chance to push the Americans back. 9 hours after the start of the offensive, American troops entered the operational space and, pursuing the retreating columns of the Reds, moved towards Shanghai. Not allowing the PLA to break away from the chase, tanks and armored personnel carriers of American volunteers broke into the city. If Wedemeyer's group could not keep up the pace and drive the communists out of the city before they dug in, they would be drawn into bloody urban fighting, where vehicles would suffer heavy losses from ambushes and surprise attacks from the rear. The American volunteers took advantage of the element of surprise and the mobility of their troops, quickly occupying key bridges and roads, cutting the defenses apart. The speed of the American strike paralyzed Shanghai's defense system. Attacking tanks crushed supply columns and headquarters. The morale of the city's defenders was broken because they were unable to dig into the urban area before the Americans burst into the city. Separate detachments desperately held stone buildings or attacked American tanks, but the overall advantage of volunteers in armor and communications did not allow the communists to organize a systemic defense. Within a few days, the city was captured, and although many hundreds of communists retreated into the cellars and sewers and continued to attack, organized resistance in the city was crushed. The Kuomintang infantry units were already entering the city. They were supposed to clear the city of the remnants of the garrison and communist sympathizers. A large number of volunteers went to fight off counterattacks to the south and north, pushing the PLA away from the city, while the rest remained in the city, helping the KMT infantry. But the moment the guns fell silent, the politicians began to speak. The Americans gave Chiang Kai-shek the opportunity to talk about victory in the strategic battle for Shanghai, which boosted the morale of the KMT army. Nationalist propaganda proclaimed the victory in Shanghai as the turning point of the entire war. At the same time, the political battle was raging in the UN General Assembly. The military did its job, showing the world that the Republic of China was capable of continuing the war against the communists. The next move was for American diplomats. The The American delegation stated the need for a UN police action in China. It was proposed to create an international peacekeeping force that would help the recognized government of Chiang Kai-shek to end the civil war. According to the resolution, the American government assumed most of the obligations for the organization of the UN military group. The ports of the colonial powers would be officially used as logistical hubs, and the airfields on the territory of mainland China and Taiwan were to receive aviation forces, which were also equipped on the basis of US Air Force units. In fact, the United States proposed to legalize the act of military intervention in the Chinese Civil War under a UN mandate, without requiring other members of the Security Council to actively participate in this operation. Western countries did not see a problem in supporting such an action. If the resolution were adopted, only the will of the American government determined how many soldiers and equipment would be sufficient for the success of the mission. However, the American plan collapsed when the Soviet Union exercised its veto power and blocked the resolution. When the news reached Washington, after some deliberation, President Truman informed Wedemeyer that he did not consider it necessary to escalate tensions and send troops and material without a UN mandate. As a consolation, he assured that in the event of a threatening situation, the Wedemeyer Group would receive additional support, and the Flying Tigers Air Group would be unofficially recreated on the basis of General Chennault's Civil Air Transport Company. Nevertheless, despite the victory in Shanghai, General Wedemeyer's group remained only a fire brigade in comparison with the scale of the fighting armies. The war continued.